Hello, and welcome to Screwball Psyche. Today, we are going to be talking about the real Spartacus. The historical Spartacus was the inspiration for two certified fresh films. Firstly, the 1960 classic Spartacus and Ridley Scott's multi-award winning Gladiator in the year 2000. In more recent years, Spartacus has been explored in the brutally seductive, blood-filled TV series which shares the same name as its hero. But how did one man inspire such a wealth of cinematic brilliance to stand the test of time? This being despite every effort of the Romans to crush any memory of his rebellion. For one, it is an epic, almost unimaginable tale of overcoming oppression and the crushing brutality of slavery. Spartacus and his men served vicious vengeance on the edge of a blade, cutting their way to freedom and their ultimate demise. The man before the myth was born around 100 years BC in Thrace, which is now known as the Balkan region. Specifically, most agree that he came from what is now known as Bulgaria. As a young man, he was sold into slavery as a gladiator from his hometown in Thrace, a known slave trader route at the time. It has been suggested by some, including HistoryNet, that he may have served and deserted from the Roman army before being caught. Ancient Greek historians such as Appian and Roman writer Florus claimed this, but many modern historians believe there is no evidence to suggest this was the case. When captured or sold into slavery, he was sent to Capua, around 20 miles from Rome. Capua was very much the Madison Square Garden of gladiator combat. The gladiator trainer Lentulus Batiatus bought the heavyweight fighter at auction and trained him in the style of Murmillo. A Murmillo fought using a long shield and a broadsword. In the training yard, he was beaten, threatened and trained to become a tactical, merciless killing machine. This would later come back to haunt the slave masters. Little is known of his ability in the arena, as there are no official records of his fights. However, to have survived such a brutal life or death game with his body and reputation intact, he must have been lethal. Presumably, he had either incredible charisma, persuasion skills, athletic prowess, or all three to be able to convince 70 plus multi-ethnic slaves to revolt. In 73 BC, Spartacus, aided by his commanding officers Crixus and Oenomaus, led an uprising against the gladiator school. He and his comrades broke out of the barracks, stormed the kitchen to steal knives, cleavers, and anything that could be used as a weapon. With these makeshift weapons, they were able to defeat the Roman guards and escaped to freedom. They were then able to hijack shipments of weapons, meaning the gladiator tribe were now equipped in the finest Roman armoury. The triumphant escape inspired slaves and anti-establishment free men to join the rebellion. The small army travelled to Mount Vesuvius in defiance of the greatest empire the world has ever known. Of course, Rome sent a small force to crush the rebellion, but the bulk of the Roman forces were busy fighting in the Sertorian War and the Third Mithridatic War. Gaius Claudius Glaber was the leader of the Roman force, charged with bringing the runaway slaves to justice. However, the 3,000 men were overconfident in their abilities. They did not account for the cunning command of Spartacus. The Roman force blocked the entrance to the mountain to starve out the gladiators or force them to engage. However, the gladiators rappelled down the cliffs of the mountain using makeshift ropes from vines. This surprise attack left the Romans surrounded, and they soon fled in defeat. When news of the defeat reached Rome, they sent a 6,000 strong army led by Publius Varinius to the mountain. Again, Spartacus won, defeating a number of lead lieutenants, including Furius and Cassinius. After defeating Varinius, he took his horse in triumph. The rebellion grew and grew from there, and this small army expanded to around 70,000. However, it is believed that one of the lead commanders, Oenomaus, died around this time. The group splintered off into two groups from there, one led by Germanic leader Crixus and the other led by Spartacus. There are two theories for the split. One, that the two camps had opposing aims. Spartacus wanted to escape into Gaul to live in freedom. Crixus, on the other hand, wanted to continue plundering the countryside with an aim to march against Rome. However, it is also suggested that it was a tactical manoeuvre as a way to cover more ground. Whatever the reason, this was a fatal mistake. Crixus and his group of around 30,000 men were ambushed by Roman forces near Mount Gargano. The army, led by Lucius Gellius, decimated the gladiators, and Crixus was killed. In honour and mourning of his death, Spartacus arranged a fitting tribute. He arranged a gladiatorial games with around 400 captured Roman soldiers. He forced them to fight against each other for the amusement of the former slaves and the mockery of Rome. This infuriated Rome, who vowed to crush Spartacus and his men. In Mutina, now known as Modena, the gladiators would meet their toughest challenge yet. They would meet Gaius Cassius and his elite, battle-hardened forces in open warfare. Incredibly, Spartacus and his men were victorious, obliterating the Romans. The plan was to march his men across the Alps into freedom. However, the former slaves seemingly shunned freedom, opting instead for vengeance by marching south. As there was little honour in fighting slaves, and a growing fear of Spartacus, there was only one Roman volunteer to fight him. However, this volunteer was a formidable force. Marcus Licinius Crassus had little battle experience, but was the richest man in all Rome, and with wealth comes power. Crassus was able to recruit around 40,000 men to his cause. The opposing forces first met near Pisaemon, where Spartacus was again victorious, making the Romans flee in terror. To reinstill discipline to the Roman army, Crassus brought back the brutal punishment of decimation. This would involve killing every 10th man of those who fled. This unfortunate selectee would be beaten to death by the remainder of the forces. This was a practice which had not been performed for generations. With discipline restored, Crassus began to gain ground, driving Spartacus south in defeat. From here, Spartacus planned to cross to Sicily. This was a Roman food supply route and an island known for rebellion. His aim was to cut off the food supply and create a rebel stronghold. Spartacus struck a deal with pirates to ferry his army across to Sicily, but they betrayed Spartacus, taking his money and leaving without them. Here at the toe of Italy, they were now trapped. Crassus blocked their escape with fortifications, hoping to starve them out. The gladiators tried to break through the fortifications, but were defeated, losing around 6,000 men. However, in defiance, and as an act of psychological warfare, Spartacus nailed a captured Roman soldier to a cross in full view of the Roman army. But then, Spartacus, sensing defeat, offered himself up as a sacrifice to Crassus. He would surrender himself in exchange for the freedom of his fellow rebels. This was rejected. Amazingly, Spartacus once again used a nighttime surprise attack and broke the Roman fortifications. Once again, he was free and began to march north. This move, however, made him even more vulnerable. He was now surrounded by 3 armies. Generals Pompey and Lucullus both returned from foreign war and were instructed to put down the rebellion. They approached from east and west, with Crassus taking up the rear. At this time, the German contingent, led by Gannicus, again decided to march as a separate unit, and once again this led to a crushing defeat. Crassus defeated around 35,000 of the rebels, vastly shrinking the strength of the army. The final act of defiance was the Battle of Salarius River, a brutal battle which led to the slaughter of the remaining forces. Some historians claim as much as 36,000 rebels were killed, including Spartacus. However, interestingly enough, his body was never recovered. In warning to any further rebellions, Crassus took the remaining captors from the battle to Capua. From Capua, along the Appian Way to Rome, 6,000 rebels were crucified to line the passage to Rome. So ended the remarkable story of Spartacus, and how he fought back against the greatest empire in ancient history. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please like, subscribe and share to help the channel grow. Please also comment with any video suggestions.